Hello, everyone. Larry Bailey here with Mortgage Workflow Partners. Hope everybody's doing great. Let's go ahead and get everybody in. And for those that are listening on podcast or other streams, etc., thanks very much for coming. We meet every Tuesday at 4 p.m., except for next Tuesday, which is July 4th, which we will not be here. And then on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. As a heads up, we are going to be moving to just using the community. That's the Mastering Encompass community. You'll find that at masterengencompass.com. You'll find the link there. And free to join. Everybody, no matter who you work for, can join the community. Doesn't matter. It's open to everyone. We share information there, but that's where these events are going to be hosted out of, and that's where you'll find the links to join. And for those that are here today, thank you very much for coming. As always, I appreciate it. I appreciate the company and hopefully the conversation. So before we get going, and as Amy, I screwed it up and I forgot to update the chat so that everybody can chat with each other. So let me see if I can fix that right now. There we go.
I was going to say that I can just send you evil messages.
Yes, you can.
Nobody else knows how evil I am.
Very, I wasn't going
have to censor.
We do have to censor you. So listen, today's topic's all about custom input form versus native input form. That's the topic, but as always, you come first. So does anyone have any questions, concerns? I know that in the community, you had, Amy, you sent me a private message. I didn't know if you want to talk about that, but Luba, you've got a question. Your hand is up. You're very professional. So thank you for raising your hand.
I try. So if you use a service for title fees, how are you managing changes to the title fees between different quotes?
Okay, so let's share screen here. And again, if you're listening on our podcast, which is great, thank you for doing that. But if you want to see the screen share on this, get over to the community and watch along. So Luba, do you mean like after you get a quote from her, from company A or company B? Like, tell me more about the problem.
Yeah, so we get a quote from a company, and then when we get another quote because either something changed or it's just, we're ready to redisclose, we want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date fees. Yeah. There are different fees that change for no reason.
Yeah, so like one lender, and I'm going to use attorneys because I like to pick on attorneys, but one attorney splits out all their fees and another attorney consolidates them into one snuffleupagus fee, like that kind of a thing, right?
No. So let's say, I have a spreadsheet, hold on. Let's say we pulled a quote and then we pull a quote a couple of days later and our title search fee goes up for some reason. Still pulling from the same company.
Oh, so you're seeing the changes on like your fee variance worksheet and you're getting hit with something on that?
Yep.
Okay. So your question is, what is everybody else doing about that? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's just us that are running into this.
I don't think it's, first of all, I don't think it's just you. I don't know. For those that are on the call here, or if you're somewhere else and you're doing a chat, the question plainly is, how are you making sure that your fees are staying consistent from one spot to the next? Luba, a quick question for you as I'm saying this out loud. How often are you re-pulling fees through a service versus manually updating fees after the initial pull?
Anytime we redisclose until we have identified a title company.
You're going out and what's the service? Are you using Lodestar? Or who are you using?
Yes, Lodestar.
Okay. So that's a great question. Anybody want to take that? And for those that are here, do you have any thoughts on that? Are you hitting the same thing? Are you doing the same workflow?
Yeah.
So the general answer that I can think of is it's fairly rare from all the clients I've worked with over the years, even the ones that we're helping with right now. It's fairly rare to go out and re-hit title fees during the process after the initial disclosure. but before the borrower has chosen. So that's my first question for you, Luba, is if today's the 27th and I just got the file into processing, I'm going to go do disclosures. I go to Lodestar, I pull the fees in, everything works great because they're a great service. And then the file gets disclosed and then it goes into processing. Who else is like, why would you want to update title fees before the borrower's chosen? Because loan amount changes, or what is some of the circumstances?
Sometimes there's a loan amount change. Sometimes it's just, we just want to make sure we have the most up-to-date fees.
Yeah, that's cool. Are you more worried about the title charges, or are you more worried about like recording costs, but recording costs, things like that?
Recording transfer stamps, recording fees were fine. It's mostly the title charges. So like sometimes they'll add like an exam fee or an admin fee that they didn't on the first quote.
I would say this, and on the chat, Kevin gave us an answer. Thanks, Kevin and Amy and Kirsten. So the general answer, I'm with them. The general answer is they're not actually going out and getting new quotes until the borrower has chosen. And once the borrower is chosen, that updated title goes to processor, and the processor is reviewing the fees from the title quote with the itemization. And if there's a change, they're making that change directly. And they're obviously updating the borrower did shop for, assuming the borrower did shop, or updating on the pop outs here on screen. Of course, everybody, please make sure you're doing that. Borrower can shop for, did shop for, so it gets on the correct spot for your CD. But that's kind of the feedback, Luba, that I would, I'd kind of go and look. If you're having a problem with fees changing in the middle and nobody knows what's going on, I would say stop the automation and consolidate that into someone's job to maybe pull the fee in only exactly when you want it to, and they review it at that point for.
Well, yeah, we don't have an automation. Our disclosure desk does it.
But
and that's when they're noticing is so if the loan amount changed, you wouldn't pull new title fees. You would just go with what you originally quoted.
Until it's actually, so again, this is right. I don't run a mortgage company, but I can tell you that from until the borrower chooses who they're going to use for title, what are you doing? Like, why are you updating it? They haven't even, like, you have no idea who they're going to use for title yet. Like, why do you care about a disclosed fee?
Because we're sending out a new LE, so.
But the borrower hasn't chosen who they're using yet, right?
So even though there was changes to the loan file, we're still okay sending.
Hey, listen,
what
you
was
got to
there.
check. You got to check with your compliance department on this. I mean, I know you've got to go in over there, and this is a compliance question, but from a workflow perspective, you've got fee variance worksheet. You can do an input form to audit specific fields that are constantly being updated to give you a summary sheet. But honestly, that's what the fee variance worksheet tool is all about. So I don't know if I'm helping you.
Kind of.
You know what I mean? I mean, I go, right, you get your LE baseline, and then they go do new fees, and then you come here and you notice a change, and you're like, yeah, but we want to redisclose because we updated the loan amount. Honestly, you're not even supposed to redisclose unless there's a valid change. And if there's a valid change and the borrower still hasn't shopped for title, like, again, I'm not quite sure what your requirements are. I would defer to your compliance officer for that. But does anybody else have any other opinions on this? For those that just joined, Luba asked, hey, we disclosed a borrower on June 1st. On June 5th, the loan amount changes. They're re-pulling title fees through their Lodestar integration manually. And they're noticing fees are changing, and they're not, they're looking for see if anybody else does it that way.
Who are you quoting on your SSPL, and are you sending it out as can shop on all of the title fees?
Question.
Quoting priority title.
Okay.
And yes, can shop.
Okay. And then how many of your customers actually use priority title?
Probably nobody.
So what are you worried about?
This is
because if nobody uses it, or very few use it, that's why you're quoting priority title is
Oh, because they're a service
it-
provider that's possible to be used.
Right. And then if the borrower uses anybody else, then you're not held to tolerance on those title fees.
Yes, I thi- we're-
Presumably.
I think where we're struggling is we're used to saying, okay, these are the most up-to-date fees, so that's what we're trying to do, and then now we have new fees.
That's where I thought you were gonna head. So if you're trying to run an operation where you're trying to, before the borrower chooses their own title company, say, hey, listen, your loan amount change and these are your updated expected cash to close, and you're trying to be professional about that. I get what you're doing, Luba, as a company. I totally appreciate that. But to Kevin's point, and probably everybody else listening, they're like, you're killing yourself for a borrower who still doesn't even know who they're using for title yet.
Right.
And if they did actually use priority, excuse me, Larry,
Yeah.
if they did actually use priority title and you changed in those fees, you maybe don't have a valid change of circumstance depending on what changed.
Well, loan amount changed. So that would be a valid if the borrower made the request.
But did it, or are they just going out and checking fees again and something changed?
No, it did change. They had the disclosure desk got a valid COC request.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a reason to do it. It's just a matter of a balance between business reason and compliance reason. And I think that's the big question, right? And that's Luba, that's what you're looking for. I would say, let's continue the conversation because it's a great conversation for everyone, but I'd ask you to like summarize that into a post and put it on the community and
Okay.
just be like, hey, guys, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Are we all alone? Because
Okay.
there you'll get like 500 people looking at the thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And have a response in writing. I can
Yeah. It'd
show
be
other
like,
people, be like, here.
look, that's awesome. That's a great question, Luba. Thanks for that. We had some other folks join. Again, these are open time for open questions. Is anyone? I was going to talk about input forms, standard native versus custom. But anyone else have any questions they want to ask for the group that's here? Okay, if you change your mind, raise your hand, put it in the chat. So I did a post. It was actually a while ago on LinkedIn where I usually do these kinds of polls, and I'm like, hey, this is a while ago, and I just redid it this morning. Consistently, I'm finding companies that Mortgage Workflow helps with work, and then also just generally speaking, that companies are consistently going into Encompass and they are leveraging the native forms only to customize them to what they feel is a benefit. And so for the group here, you can do show of hands if you want. You can stay silent. It's okay. Who actually in their input form set here, if you're seeing the screen, but who actually has to work in an Encompass environment where you're not using the native 1003 or the URLA lender, you're using some kind of custom. So Luba's got her hand raised. Jolene, Kirsten. All right, so wow, everybody. See, this is so crazy to me because I'm just I'm not that kind of guy. So, so I don't know, whoever wants to go first, but tell me why it's important to not use the native 1003.
I would go with it's faster for a user if you just start at the top and give them their workflow. And once they hit the bottom, they can just hit finish milestone and move on to the next thing without having to bounce back and forth between 5 or 6 different forms that may not have all the information they care about.
So I'm gonna give you a timeout real quick. So you're talking about creating a summary form, and I appreciate summary forms. I got a ton of them. I got a really good summary form that everybody loves. I'm asking a different question, and I want to make sure everybody gets my question. My question is, like, I work with a client who literally took the 1003 URLA part 1 in the input form builder, copied it, and literally just put a button right here on the screen to do something. That's the only change they made. That's what I'm talking about. Not a summary form, but the actual 1003. Anybody have the same answer, or did I just kind of give you a different scenario?
I think the 1003 is completely different because I would be afraid. I mean, I have a ton of custom forms, and we are huge believers in putting everything on one form for a job where you don't have to go in. You have got it all in one place. However, the 1003, there's too many things when they change it all the time and they do things. Every time you customize it and they make one little tiny change, you've got to make sure that you capture that. And there's too many things that feed to a government or a legit form that you have to have that I just think it's not worth on the 1003 itself. Everything else I could say you could do away with and put them all on custom forms except that 1003.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Amy. I'm on your team on this. So Jolene, Kevin, I forget who else had their hand raised. Change of answer. Do you actually customize the 1003, or were you talking about like a summary, like what Brian was talking about? Because I see a lot of summaries, and again, I'm a huge believer in operations using summary forms, because you know everybody in operations doesn't always need to go through a 1003. Now in sales, Jolene, summary, thanks, Jolene. Now in sales, when we go through, like I have a whole sales and operations mastering thing. And so I went through this when I taught, when I built up the course I did for Kenzie May University back in 2021 with the new 2020 1003. I went through and I advocated strongly to sales interviewers should exclusively be using the 1003 part 1. I like starting with the part 1, 2, 3, 4, then flipping back to your LA lender. There is no summary in the world that beats that flow. And I'll debate that forever. But when it comes to operations, yeah, do you really need to see every field in this exact order? No, definitely not. So let me flip the conversation then for those that do have summary forms. How much of your time, I know this is going to be really hard, it's a hard question, but how much of your time do you allocate to periodically go back into those custom forms to make sure everything is still aligned to your workflow that your company is using? Is that a monthly thing for you? Is it a quarterly thing? Is it like only if they tell me there's a problem? Like what's the vibe here from the group? Anybody want to speak up about that?
They tell us, hey, we want something new. Hey, can you do this magic? I'm like, yeah. And so then we constantly, it seems like we're changing a lot of the forms to adding new things and only maintaining the ones that break, like a link maybe has broken or something like that. And we just rely on them to tell us. We're in them often enough that we kind of have a feel for them, but our people do a pretty good job of letting us know when they want something extra added in or want something moved to this down here instead of up here. So.
Okay. Other than that, it's pretty much unless they tell you it's broke, it ain't broke.
Right. Or unless we know there's an update coming that's going to change it natively. And then we turn around and then we'll fix. We just do that.
I got you. Do you ever, Amy, I'm going to pick on you because you always talk. So do you ever, you're welcome. Sorry. Do you ever go through and actually?
Katie's laughing. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Katie's always quiet. She's like, you're like Penn and Teller. She's like Penn, right? Is that the quiet one or Teller? I always get them confused. Anyway, the question I was going to ask was, are you ever spending time, or anyone on your team ever spending time watching somebody use your customized forms in workflow to make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing?
We do, and we have meetings and stuff. Like before we even create one, we're like, okay, what do you guys want? And then we say, okay, now we piece something very loosely together because we know we're going to move it around. And then we go through a lot of input before we even get one out there and stuff. And then, yes, we do go through and we say, okay, here's what it is. Now test it. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you do like. Tell us if you want something, So we do watch them and we do keep track of it and stuff. Do I watch them now on a form that we've had for 2 years? Probably no, not those. But anytime we have a new one or anything that we're doing a pretty good overhaul on, then yeah, we do. And we have several testers. At different levels, we'll say, hey, I want you to test it. Then and we get all of those people to test it and give us the feedback. And then as a group, you know, Kay and I decide kind of what goes on there. They guide us to what they want, and then we kind of make it usable for them or whatever.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to this? Like, do you follow anything like what Amy does? Do you have testers? Do you have a protocol? Do you kind of wait for somebody to tell you what they need? Like, what's the update from anyone else? Because I can tell you it's fairly rare. And I'll give you a good example. I walked in, we're helping a huge CTP company basically revamp their entire workflow, and their input forms are in desperate need of being updated. Like, they literally haven't been touched in 4 years. And when I went through each of the departments, because we go through and we interview every department and we make sure everything's working. Like, I literally yesterday, or was it this morning? No, it was this morning. I found out that they built a custom input form, and the way that they configured the input form and the business rule, it requires the user to go do something in the VOL screen just to get the custom input form to work properly so that they can finish their milestone. And it's like, how long has this been going on? And the person I worked with was like, oh, it's been that way since I got here. I said, how long is that? And she said, 3 years. And you might be rolling your eyes, be like, well, why didn't they say something? And the answer is because that's how they were trained. That's how they're using it. And of course, everybody on this call or watching this would be like, that's so obvious. Like, why wouldn't they just know that that's not what's supposed to happen? And the reality is, that's your job. That's my job, is to go there and be like, nah, I don't know if that's right. Like, let's do something about that maybe. And so that's kind of why I'm bringing this up, is a lot of times when we build these custom forms, we treat it as administrators, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not preaching, I'm just saying this is what we do. But we'll create things and then we'll kind of let it go, and we'll wait for somebody to tell us there's a problem. But if they don't know that that's a problem, how are they supposed to tell you? And so Amy's got, puts a note. Thank you, Amy. Says regular meetings about most department asking about this. Yeah, and that's great, and that's healthy. And Amy, I think you guys are on a phenomenal track. And I really want everybody who's listening to this to take note that as administrators, I get kind of geeky on this stuff, but I'm extraordinarily passionate to make sure I get up and walk around. Now, I know we're in a new world, and it's very hard to do decentralized locations, and you can't always walk around, but you can do screen shares. Like, I could Teams with anybody, and if you use whatever Google, like Luba's company, you can do Google Meets or whatever. But watching people do the work on your customized forms is critical. And I really, really want everybody to take stock of what input forms you've customized, and when was the last time you looked at them? Maybe you inherited the system. When was the last time you looked at the code? So, that's the thing. I don't always expect everybody to know when it's not working properly, air quote. That's on us as administrators in a community. Any thoughts on that? Any feedback on that? Again, this is kind of a group thing. I know not everybody has a microphone, that kind of a thing.
One thing that Amy and I have noticed is when we do these regular meetings, and the more we discuss things and how they do it, and they feel more free to speak out, they know that no question is stupid. And if they think it's something that can be done on a form, ask. And so when you have the regular meetings, we find that they're more open to bring things to us like, hey, can you do this? Just because when they're all in one room, they speak out more.
You do it as a group. Do you do it by department, or do you do it like as a company thing?
By a department.
By department. Okay. So everybody everybody who's focused in that one area of Encompass kind of a thing.
Yep. And a lot of time, we'll have closers and processors in there together too, depending on what group we're with. We also, we had actually a closer request us to do a meeting, just kind of like, hey, did you know you could do this in Encompass, and just talk things out. And in that meeting is anybody. It's open to loan officers, processors, closers, and they can come in and we discuss things like, well, hey, did you know that you can go into tools and you can find this here? And then it also will, hey, could you add something onto this form so that we could access the same thing? So it opens up that communication, and they're more open. After those meetings, we've discovered that they're more open to come to us with stuff as they're working.
Because you'll actually listen to what they're saying.
Right.
I think that's great. I think that's.
We also reiterate too that there's ask us for anything. We don't, we don't, the worst we'll say is no, but I mean, we're like, the bigger the challenge, we're like, let's reach out and see
I
if we
heard
can
you
do
were
it. I
really
think we can
mean
do
about
that.
this, though. I heard you were like yelling at people and stuff. Is that right?
I don't shame them. No, not when they ask and they do. I only shame loan officers.
They only cry sometimes.
Yes,
Okay.
they
Well, as
only
long as
cry.
it's only sometimes.
It's only loan officers.
That's good. Is
But
anyone
it's
else?
important. I
Yeah.
just think it's really important to include them in on decisions and ask them. And we just tell them, don't ask us anything. Don't be afraid to ask them. And we try to do everything that they ask for us because it's nice to be. It encourages them to come back.
I'm going to take the other side of this, right? So I know that there's some people that are going to be listening to this or even in this call today where they're like, no, I don't want to ask them because they'll just want everything and they'll never stop. Like, I don't know if anybody is in that mode. I know.
Yeah, they run out of
them.
stuff. Most of them aren't technologically proficient enough to know what all they can really ask you.
Okay.
And they honestly, and they don't, like, after we had probably 4 or 5 meetings with the closers and processors, loan officers, they were starting running out of things that they were asking us and
You
stuff. And
emptied their
it's just,
cup. You're like, you drained them.
it only takes 4 or 5, then you're done. No,
That's so funny.
but no, they don't always know exactly. So then, but as we're listening, we're like, well, wait, you're struggling with that. Wait, why are you struggling? Oh, I think we can fix that. So we're listening all the time to what they're struggling with to see what we can come up with to put on a form or how to do that. And so we do walk around. We do, when somebody has an issue, we're like, well, let me just come over to your desk,
That's great.
and then I'll just come over there and then you show me how you're doing it. And then we're like, oh, why are you doing it that way? So you do have to walk around, like you said, you do have to have them show you how they're doing it, because you may think that they're doing it that way, but they aren't. They're never doing it the way you expect them to, it seems like. So it's always good to do that. I think it's critical. I mean, it's very crucial to having a good relationship between your Encompass admins and the rest of the people who are using it, Encompass.
Not that anybody would be against the idea of doing something for the better, but does anyone have any other side to that? Any other experiences to share when you try to help or expose, or any lessons learned anybody wants to share on those experiences? Everybody's quiet. They're like, no, everything's great over here. I could just tell you that, again, from my side, scope creep is a big deal. So you can get yourself into a really huge list of wants and features. And I will tell you that document everything. So whether you're using OneNote or you're using a project management platform or you're using Microsoft Planner, or whatever Google has, sorry, I don't remember what that is, Luba, but the Google thing, whatever that is, keeping things tracked, right? In making sure that you don't overextend, don't overpromise. It is really, and I don't know if Amy, you and Katie had this issue, but it's one thing to say, oh, we could do that. And it turns out you can't because of whatever reason. So the idea, that's a good point, Lou. I'm going to speak to testing in a second. So I would just say, if you ask for that feedback, make sure you document it, make sure you prioritize, and then close the coding window and say, this is what we're doing, and this is when we're delivering it. Don't let scope creep happen. Luba says that the feedback cycle sometimes can be problematic. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but basically no one wants to do testing. I've had that where you're like, hey, you asked for this, I need you to test it. And they're like, yeah, we're too busy. So that's a tough one. And that requires some leadership participation is a good way to say that from the team. And it's not on here, but I've also incentivized folks to become our advocates, right? So maybe you talk to management and say, hey, listen, maybe this person can be our tester, goes beyond their normal job description. So maybe they get an extra, ice cream cone or something whenever they want, kind of a thing. One of those thoughts. So, hey, listen, we're almost out of time. Today's discussion's been awesome. I have one other, again, some announcements to hear, but last round for any questions before we run out of time completely. Bribery is good. Bribery never hurts usually, as long as it's not to borrowers or third parties. Hey, so make sure that you remember Thursday's call is the last call on Zoom, last one. So if you're confused about where you're going to go, get over to masterencompass.com, get into the Mastering Encompass community. You'll see the events. They're going to say Zoom, but the very last one for Zoom is Thursday. After that, get to the community. You can see it go live. We can do Brady Bunch style if you want to come up and talk on stage, so to speak. There's room for 8. If not, you can hang back and chat. Not a big deal. And then we'll take it from there. So we're going to take a pause for Tuesday, and then we're back going again live in the community on the 6th of July. So if you have any questions, please post them in the community. We're going to talk on Thursday. We're going to talk about exploring all native Encompass tools for sales and operations team, because to Amy's point, as she said just a moment ago, a lot of folks don't even realize what's in Encompass because they're just so blinders on doing their work. They don't even realize what they already have the opportunity to use. So we're going to talk more about that. Again, can't thank you enough for coming here to these live events. Glad we're able to answer questions. Make sure a little bit that you put that in the community, because I think there's some other people that might give you some more feedback than just this group. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Make a great month, and thanks for coming. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.